So, what is it like to be on a tifo?
Are you asking me personally? I've never been on a tifo. Like, I mean, standing on a
I
tifo,
haven't
painting a
either.
tifo. I mean, you mean depicted on a tifo? I don't have that
Yeah,
practical
yeah.
experience. I talked to a few players after the season opener last Saturday, and Ilie Sanchez, who is not on the tifo, said that he tries to not pay attention to them when they go up, just focus on the game, but he could not
Mhm.
help it, he said, and it gave him chills. He further went on to touch back on something that he talked about as previously, which was how he feels about this phase of his career, how he feels Austin is the right fit. And he said that this just reemphasized to him that yes, indeed, this was the right choice, the smart choice. He didn't use those words, but that's what he meant in his heart. Talked to John Gallagher too. He was appreciative as always, flattered, couldn't hold back that Irish grin.
Mhm.
Was curious about it. Apparently, the players are really curious about it. How did they pick who was on it? And I could only speculate because I didn't actually know for sure, even though at an early stage, I was aware that they wanted all six jerseys to be represented and for the player
Mhm.
in each of those jerseys to have actually played in that jersey for sure.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I could have asked Joel Corral before we recorded this, but the conversations I've had with the TIFO leads who were working on this with him were that there was an early conversation about maybe the six guys who've been here the whole time, but then
Mhm.
Stuver isn't a field player, so you'd be putting Stuver in a field jersey. Okay, what if we do some of the guys who've been here all 6 years or all
Mhm.
5 years and a couple guys that are just favorite players of the artist? So we ended up with John Gallagher, with Danny Pereira, and then in the middle, Guilherme Biru and CJ Fodre. And
Mhm.
then rounding things out, Jean Kolmanich and Julio Cascante. And when I talked to Julio about it, he got this smile, this thing that what he said with his words and what he said with the look on his face was that this is what he signed up for. This is the version of this club and this experience at this club that he loves and that means so much to him and to so many of the players. It feels like the big reset now that they've gotten to play an actual competitive game has rolled over to the players who in asking him about it I said I don't want to ask you about the past. There's elements of the past that are incorporated into talking about the present, but how do things feel? How does this feel as the beginning of a new season? And he said that this is exactly what all of them have been hoping for and wanting and looking forward to all these weeks of preseason. And just the vibes and energy in the locker room, which last year at various points were different and sometimes new lows of funereal. We saw that. We saw plenty of that last season. Nothing even close to that this time around. You
Mhm.
know, a happy and smiling Owen Wolf, who is, look, if anybody doubted this guy's quality of play, I got 90 minutes of evidence otherwise for you.
He still time stuff, so he got in right after the half hour window where we could talk to him. All we
Look,
could do was compliment him on his game. We didn't get to ask him anything, you know?
he lets the other guys get at the showers first. He's a
Sure,
generous
sure.
man, this Owen. But yeah, like all around, the vibes and energy of an Austin FC tifo, which not selfishly going to bat for the beat that we cover, but by the league's reckoning, by comments that come in, even from fans of deeply opposing rival teams. Um, the tifo game in Austin has not missed a step and has just kept right on trucking.
Mhm.
And finally, it feels like we've got a roster, we've got a sporting direction, an overall operation that matches the tifos that are undefeated in the stands.
Yeah, I do think there's a missed opportunity to not put Stuver on, speaking about that. And we
Okay.
did learn something distressing from him on Saturday. So apparently he did not like the Malibu stew kit.
Wow.
I
So
know.
so
We all liked it on him a
I
lot.
this new purple one, different than the purple one from
Mhm.
last season, which
The
had
grimace.
Verde accents,
Mhm.
grimace with the green highlighter outlines. This new purple one, I mean, look, if Stu is going that hard on hating the Malibu stew, there's the violet crown. I think that's the violent crown kit on Stuver because he does not hold back. He is ruthless. He's a killer.
Emergency podcast. they did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, hell yeah, shut up, hell yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. Not too many emergencies for Austin, except they are traveling to Portland this weekend. Moisés, how are you doing? And wow, the tifo, 1,000 hours of work.
Over 1,000 hours of work.
That's
this
amazing.
This is something that I don't know why I hadn't thought of this before, but knowing that they track shifts that people paint on these things to do merit badges, another thing unique to the Austin experience. I don't know that other supporters group cultures around MLS have a merit badge program for people who work on their tifos, but Austin does.
Right.
So I reached out to my pal Logan, who works on that, helping head that up, along with another gang of incredibly handsome and talented, very intelligent people. Not talking about myself, certainly, though I might be one of those people. And I said, hey, take a look at the spreadsheet. Could you estimate how many human hours go into just the painting, just the shifts that people sign up for, the leads that haul the paint buckets and get everything set up before everybody shows up? And then they chimed in, and they also chimed in with some estimates of, it's, if that's over 700 hours, then just conservatively, the running to get paint, running to get materials, sewing was included in the quote unquote paint totals. They said, then total, it's got to be at least over 1,000. And then Cheryl and Claire, the patch moms who make the merit badges, chimed in with the stats on how many hours of work goes into those, both planning and designing, and then the actual work hours that their embroidery machines do mechanically. Now, granted, that's automated. But what isn't automated is that every single one of those patches comes off of that embroidery machine, and they have to take a butane torch to the edges of it to seal it. There is an incredible amount of craftsmanship that goes into all of this that I'm glad that we finally have the beginning of some numbers to look at, because that is something that you can say that to a player, which I mentioned to a couple of them, John included.
Yeah.
And they were like, that is even more incredible than we already thought. Because they're always wowed by it. They always think it's beautiful, but when they think about the amount of time that goes into it, they calculate that against the time that they spend on the road, the time that they spend in practice and everything.
How does one get a merit badge? How many hours do you have to put in to get a merit badge? Because now I'm intrigued.
So you can do 2 shifts, any 2 painting shifts, doesn't matter. Or if you do just the night of practice and rigging, generally it's a couple nights before the game itself. The group gets together, they spread it all out. The tifo will have been grommeted and taped around the edges so that it won't tear. And those grommets, you put zip ties through them, and they're zip tied to a net. Now, from a distance, you don't see the net. So when we did the Dragon tifo last season, you just saw these clouds floating as if by magic. They were actually attached to a net. With the naked eye from that distance, you couldn't see it. There's a really neat optical illusion that goes into it. And one of the things that I find most interesting, there's fan fiction, speculation in science fiction, but in the tifo world, there's tifo fan fiction of how do you think that they do this? Or what does their rigging actually look like? And there are whole conversations about how St. Louis's setup is not ideal, that they put all that money into a stadium and they don't have nearly as good of a rigging situation as Austin does, because you've got to hoist this stuff on ropes. So where are those ropes? And some stadiums, the hoisting is done entirely on the roof, and the people doing the hoisting can't see the level at which different parts of the tifo are at. So sometimes you get the incredibly uneven horror shows that you see in, I'll be charitable and not mention city names, but I think people who know the ones that look like hastily draped bed sheets know what I'm talking about.
I know the design of the stadium was specifically, in part, not the entire design, but that rigging was factored in, that tifo was figured into the design, that they did have that in mind.
That's something that I wasn't around for that era of things, but to hear tell from people who were, that very much was a consideration. And as many things as maybe the front office doesn't always listen to everything that the SGs say that they want, this was an incredibly important thing that is visibly paying those dividends, not just in season review posts about great tifos of the year, but look at match day 1. Show me another one that did something new, something different, something. What I alluded to was that it's real big, but it does things differently than Austin fans have in the past. It was extensively cut out, which is something that helps with wind drag. You don't have one giant sail that you're raising, especially in windy conditions. And an anecdote that I am aware of from the night of practice and rigging, which I wasn't there for, had something else I had to do, is that the wind, they figured out definitely what the upper limit of the wind rating that they could safely raise one of these, even with it being extensively cut out, having all those holes for airflow.
Yeah.
Because a particular member who'll go unnamed of the front office staff who was helping work on this and doing the pulling and the rigging, the wind picked up so hard that it lifted him off the ground. He almost did a defying gravity and went flying like Elphaba. And so some things were learned. Momentary terror turned into, now we know what we're not doing, and it's good that it's somebody covered presumably by the front office's liability insurance policy. Yeah, it's always an adventure. It's a fascinating process that anybody listening to this, either in the Austin market or otherwise, it's a fascinating part of supporter group culture that is one part theater, one part marshaling forces, military style, but with a pacifist message, and one part absolutely unpredictable problem solving that ends in crushed beers and absolute joy and elation once it goes up.
And apparently with this one, a sprinkle of Wicked.
Just a little. Just a little. I cannot wait to see what fan bases try to do with Wicked this season and how Austin will put literally all of them to shame.
Was there something? Are you
that's the thing, is I'm not betraying any confidences. I'm just assuming that since the signature color of the movie and the musical is one of Austin's colors, and this fan base being as creative as they are, I'm not aware of an existing concept that is already in the works, but I would be shocked if discussions had not already been had about how to do better than everybody else that might just try to go to a vinyl banner printer, which Austin has never done.
All right, let's talk about the 90 minutes that happened after the tifo. Of course, a 1-0 win over Sporting Kansas City. Some general thoughts that I had, and we're not gonna go play by play like some of the other podcasts have already done this week, but definitely one of the things that we want to talk about. Maybe we'll just get right into this topic. I did an article on Tuesday about this, just this kind of idea of 2 shots on target with 12 shots. SKC didn't get off a shot for the first half hour. Austin had control, I think, for a lot of this game, but still the inability to break that low block that SKC had. There were a lot of shots from distance. But then while you were getting all the great stuff about tifo and the other thoughts from players in the locker room, we were in the post-match press conference with Nico Estevez where, dare I say it, accountability for not getting Vasquez necessarily the ball that he needed, kind of the positions. Obviously, that's on the player, but he talked about needing to go back. He talked in Thursday's press conference here about working on that a little bit more. So this kind of idea that, yes, they know that they've got some final third issues still. They know that they've got to get more shots on target, but for Nico to actually own that and to go to work and then maybe see some principles at work, which I'm sure we're going to see another low block, albeit a little bit of a less effective one, with Austin FC legend Kamal Miller not able to play the Saturday's game because he got a red card 11 minutes into the 4-0 loss against Vancouver. So again, that's just setting the stage for the next one. We'll get into Portland previews in a little bit here, but just thinking about the dearth of shots on targets versus the shots. We had a very exciting first half where we saw a lot of attempts, some movement, some counters, dare I say it? Those things happened on what you saw out of that first half. And then obviously we get the goal bouncing off of Bukri's face, and all is well, 3 points, goal celebration, all that good stuff.
So a couple things, last thing first, going with the press conference and the notion of accountability. I've got a list of here's why this excites me. Here's why Nico taking accountability for needing to do a better job of getting the ball to Brandon Vasquez. The bar on that kind of accountability is in hell, as the saying goes, when it comes to hearing a head coach for Austin FC say that kind of thing. I don't want to dwell on the past. I don't want to make this all about comparison from coach to coach. But look, we have exactly 2 coaches, and this one's been here 3 months.
Right.
We have to do a version of that. The reason I'm excited about it is not that I'm giving him advanced credit, Professor West, for doing the homework that he has not done yet, but that he is committed to do. It is that, like Roto saying things early on that bore out and were not contradicted about his intention to not make panic signings, to make a concerted effort to improve things in the most important places when the best move could be made, that sort of thing. I see the same methodical, stating things plainly, not trying to hide in plain sight from something that is incredibly obvious. It is great that we are seeing this, and I feel like it'll become remarked upon less because we're going to just keep seeing this. It takes us a game or two to get used to this kind of thing, but I swear I feel like we are not getting tricked on this as much as the reflex may be to assume that we are.
I would have maybe, imagining what a former coach might have said. It might have been something along the lines of needing more verticality. Of course, we have heard the term verticalidad from Estevez, which I've really enjoyed, but we probably would have heard some variation of, there was a game plan, players have to do better, things like that. Whereas Estevez said, this is on me. I have to figure this out, complimenting Vasquez for the off-ball movement that he had, which I think is the right approach. Owen Wolf had a good game. Bukari did struggle a little bit against double teams, even though in Thursday's media availability, he said, double teams, triple teams, bring those on. I can handle those sorts of things. But I do think that, against a low block, when I was talking a little bit on this in the midweek special with Joe Lowry, he was bringing up that's probably going to happen this year. Austin's probably going to face a lot of low blocks just because of the front line that they have, and because looks Owen Wolf is also coming on as somebody who's going to be pretty threatening in the midfield, and low block is going to be one way to chess move against that.
For me, the thing that was exciting to me about all of those missed shots in the first half that were exciting in the moment, and they didn't make it. Or just missed. Or there's a chance that almost got created. They were just almost right in the right place. The reason that excited me was that it was calm. It was methodical. It was not by rote patterned. And the way that I would characterize the way that the all new Austin FC tonight at 7 Central on NBC plays is that they are going to come out with a variety of different tactics that are planned for the specific opponent that they are playing against, and either work on wearing them down, looking for specifically people that they expect the other team to bait. I think they fully expected SKC to double mark Brandon Vasquez every single second of the game that they possibly could. I think they banked on that, and they knew that that was going to happen, and that it was probably going to be difficult to get him the ball. And that's something that they need to work on. And as they're getting their third DP worked in, and Dubrsarski and Sabovic getting them more minutes and figuring out all of the weapons in their arsenal, they are taking their time and playing with the guys that they have who are at the level of readiness that they have. And isn't it miraculous what happens when you deploy a bunch of people in ways that they are comfortable performing in special and interesting ways? It was wonderful to see Owen Wolf play in a way that was not, well, you need to fill this hole over here, slugger, and that's just what we need you to do. I don't mean that in any way derogatorily to him or even his dad, but it's just that's the reality that was being faced when the roster was incredibly short. We could relitigate that, but I think there's a double jeopardy clause. Yeah, overall, just really thrilled to see that. CJ Fodre getting as many minutes as he did in a season opener is not something that I think we would have seen in the previous regime. That's the other thing that came to mind, is that this is about fresh ideas. This is about letting young players prove themselves and not going with, and I swear I've said something like this about 17 times, maybe the last time I'll say it, not falling into that old school U.S. men's national team vibe of, kids got to earn it. You know, got to rub it in the dirt and cry into the dirt under the bench that you're not going to get any minutes for about 32 games. And then we'll give you a total of 5 minutes before the season ends. I think that rewarding the incredible hustle that a player like CJ Fodre has put in over the seasons he's been with Austin, not just for the sake of rewarding it, but for the sake of further bringing him into first team form, where he runs all over second team rosters across Next Pro. Like Damian Loss, those minutes are not for him anymore. He absolutely needs truly competitive minutes. And I think we saw a level up from him in playing those first team minutes compared to the first team minutes that he got to play last season.
Yeah, what I like too is when he came on, he definitely had instructions from Estevez to give to John Gallagher because he was taking Gallagher's left wing spot and Gallagher was going to right back. There was a lot of information that Fodre was needing to convey, and I think he did that in a fairly economic way, but it did seem like there was quite a bit to communicate. And Gallagher, it's so great to have a player like that who can play left wing and then you shift him to right back and he's fine, he's functional. It's not the misadventure of putting Ethan Finley at right back, as we saw in one of those early games last year. Ethan Finley did make an appearance, by the way. He made an appearance in the press box at the start of the second half, which was fun to see.
He did. When too many of us got to chatting with him, he definitely hit a, all right, guys, I'm out. I think he said almost those words. But back on John shifting over to right back when CJ came on. Actually, I asked John about that in the locker room. And John, I said, I was digging for what kind of tactical stuff was he bringing over from the sideline, the Nico or the other coaches are saying. And he was like, I honestly don't know. A lot was going on. I was mostly just wanting to keep playing left wing because I was having a good time. But I hope he had fun. And that kind of intra-team competitiveness, that's what you want. Not the kind of silent mean girlsing kind of thing, but all right, the young kid got to play on the wing because I'm so good at so many things. I could have winged that. Yeah, that's the vibe that I think everybody really comes out to the best party in Austin for, and we got so much of that on Saturday.
Yeah, and Stuver in the post game talking about players being able to make their own decisions. Danny Pereira's talked about freedom in the past and alluded to that, I think, again. So yeah, definitely he had some things to say in the post-match interview that you did that ended up in our article that, again, it indicates that it is more refreshing for these players in this kind of setup. They are refreshingly less predictable, but it does seem like there is still purpose to what they're doing. It is going to take some time, and that was the big message that Estevez had on Thursday, that it is going to take time for these kind of relationships to develop, for them to be able to figure each other out and to be able to figure out those kind of patterns and to play off each other, including Azuni, who we think we are going to probably see here on Saturday. And yeah, anything else on this before? And then I want to get into the Azuni topic because we do have a little numerical thing to visit with him.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I keep saying I'm going to stop saying certain things. I'm going to quote Josh Wolf.
Oh, no.
Well, you know what, Phil? I worry more about bad shots on target or not. That's how I feel about the shots on target. It's one game, and I feel like one team actually threatened the goal. Granted, they only got one goal out of it, but in a 1-0 game, that's all you need.
Yeah, and save for a couple of minutes from SKC, they weren't very effective offensively. And I think a lot of that to credit Austin, their defense really held together well and didn't offer them a lot.
Just look at the difference in number of passes from Brad Stuver in this game compared to the average for last season, for 2023, even 2022.
It's a whole new world. All right. In kind of the spirit of the over-unders that have been taking over our podcasts here in the last few weeks, let's do an over-under on minutes for Azuni. Because, again, as Stefan said, he's ready, he's practiced, he's a little bit more tired than the other guys, which is understandable because he got here a lot later. It is kind of a, Murdo Azuni who came in late to camp this year. Not his fault, like with BHI last year. But let's set this number at 16.5. So we're going to say that he is either going to play more than 16 and a half minutes or less than 16 and a half minutes. Thoughts on that?
Mirtu Zuni's visa, which came in late to camp. That's the full Wheel of Fortune category. I'm going to take under. I think we see a late, I'll make as someone who hates sports betting, I'll participate, but also directly pervert your concept here. I'm going to say he plays less than 16 and a half minutes in a game that contributes to, if not directly results in the firing of Phil Neville. There
okay. You're saying that by the time he could conceivably come on minute 65 or 70, he's not needed because Austin's already up 3-0 or 4-0. Is that kind of what you're projecting?
I feel like he is brought on to continue crashing the goal in a Golazo Fest. I do not see this going well for Portland, considering who they have available and the general vacuum of space between the ears of Phil Neville. I'm getting spicy. I'm not usually like this.
No, no, I
I don't
like
know what
this.
Phil Neville did to me or my family or somebody I know, but for some reason I'm firing all guns on Phil Neville like I
I
did
like
Wayne Rooney
feisty
a couple
Moisés.
seasons ago.
This is fun. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to be contrarian here. I'm going to pick the over. I'm going to say about minute 65 or minute 70 is going to come
Okay.
on. I think regardless of score, just let's have some fun, let's party, let's see how this kind of works. I don't expect maybe that if it is kind of the route that we're thinking it might be, that Azuni and Vasquez are going to be on the field together for a ton of time, but I do think if he does come on, I think he's going to want to at least see them kind of interact for a few
Yeah.
minutes in a game situation and just see how that goes. Obviously, that's going to be one of the key things this season is how those two interact, how they interplay. Again, formations, there's a lot of speculation about, is it going to be 4-4-2? Is it going to be 4-3-3? Our formation's just a construct for people who don't know much about soccer, as Nico kind of talked about a few weeks ago. But seriously, again, just where they're going to be on the field with each other, the kind of triangles they're going to form, with Wolf or with Savovich, or, thinking about the front three and how they're going to interact with Bukari. And that's going to be essential to how they play in terms of their effectiveness, in terms of how many goal contributions they're all going to get together, because I think that those front three, I think there are going to be a lot of assisting each other on goals. I think that's going to happen. I do think there's going to be some stuff from the midfield, but I think a lot of it is going to be how those front three are able to play off one another. And this is a way to see that. This is a way to get a first glimpse of that. And hopefully it is in a situation, and we'll get into their schedule a little bit later, just what Austin faces after that away trip to Portland. But it's setting up, if they can go in and get a win against Portland, I think it's setting up to have some kind of early season, oh, let's discover Austin kind of stuff to happen after, let's say, maybe the first 6 or 7 games.
I don't know what I have for you, Phil, other than it looks like maybe there's going to be a new pope sometime soon, and new popes talk about how there's this like new pope surge, like an explosion of joy and optimism and that
Mhm.
kind of thing. This is how I feel, and there ain't even a new pope
Okay.
yet. That's the only thing I have to add. I think you covered it well.
I will actually miss this Pope, but I do feel that we might be conclave bound. We might be heading towards that here in the
This is
next.
wild social media promotion from Universal for the Oscars. The timing, I think it's in bad taste, but that's just me.
Oh my God. Don't do this.
Already did it.
Okay, so let's get into this Portland match. So again, like we mentioned before, Kamal Miller, he's going to be out. David DaCosta, he is the Evander replacement. He got 45 minutes in the match against Vancouver. He got the entire second half. I'm going to expect him to start. I'm going to expect him to get about 60 minutes. Again, Portland is this team that's in kind of a weird transition right now. They obviously are post Evander. I think DaCosta is going to work out well. Still, there are questions about their defense. Still, there's questions about the scoring. Jonathan Rodriguez is out. Felipe Mora has stepped up before as a forward, but just wondering what you think, how this shakes out, what you think is possible here. I am feeling like there's going to be a win or at least a draw out of this just because of kind of what Portland's dealing with. And I do think that there is some unsettledness with them right now, and maybe this is a good time of the year to be getting them.
I think you're right on all points. So you and Joe, I'm not misremembering this. You and Joe talked about this just a little bit on Wednesday,
Yeah,
right?
we did. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm mixing everything together like a KFC famous bowl in my head this
Okay.
week. It's been a week, man. I think you're dead on with this. I feel like we're going to get a Phil Neville in a losing press conference after the match talking
Mhm.
again. I don't know why I keep saying this. Kind of like Josh Wolf of there are the games you need to win, and then this is a game. Look, we were shorthanded, and there are 34 games, and we'll get them next time,
Right.
Tigers. And here we go.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
It feels like that is what's incoming to me.
Mhm.
Austin not being able to capitalize this, it's a failure on the field. It's a failure on the touchline if they cannot get at least a draw out of this. But I think the expectation shouldn't be that, oh, they're going to win every game. They're going to go 34-0. They're going to have that invincible season. Sure, that's unreasonable. But I think it is reasonable in this specific subjective case to see them take advantage of this groundswell of new joy, new optimistic energy. You have a Danny Pereira unleashed. You have Danny and Owen combining to form the Voltron that is Wolfeira. Credit to our friend Profe. I mean,
Love it.
you properly unleash those guys in a stadium where they like disappointing the home fans. I was there for the away game a couple years ago where Will Bruin formerly of the Sounders, did something he did multiple times on the Sounders, which was disappoint Timbers fans who thought they were about to win a game.
Right.
And I feel like this is going to be a nice signature piece of these first 7 games. Seeing the preseason work, seeing the transfer window work, all very much show them to be the contenders that they want to be, that they are telling people that they want to be, and that MLS is doubting them by not putting anything Austin in any of the promo stuff. And maybe we'll see that change.
Yeah. So again, I think, if we didn't say this before, I do think Portland, they had a low block against the Whitecaps. Again, part of that was situational. They were only playing with 10 players after the first 11 minutes. So I do think that, again, that was just game state that forced that, but I do think that might be the approach that they take. It's really weird that Vancouver, Portland, Sebastian Bush does really incredible work, does really good visualizations of those games. And if you look at Austin SKC side by side with Portland Vancouver, with just the lines of the average defensive actions, they're eerily similar. They're maybe like a meter or two off. So Austin average defensive action was much higher up the field, which kind of reflected the pressing that they were doing. Obviously, SKC in a low block, Portland was the same thing. Hardly for SKC in that match and for Portland in that match, hardly any defensive actions in the opposing half. It was all tucked into the box. It was all contained there. So that's going to be the same puzzle. That's going to be the challenge. One thing that Austin did try to do, obviously, is shooting from distance. 8 of those 12 shots were from either that periphery of the box or outside the box. So we might see some of that. And again, that's part of why I'm excited to see Azuni, is just because that's a lot of his game. Like, he does shoot from distance. His average distance of his shots in La Liga when he was in that year was 18 yards. So I can see some of that similarly coming on. But I do feel like Esteves has some other stuff worked out. If he's had a week to think about it, and if he's given himself that homework assignment, I'm expecting to see some unexpected things that I'm going to be very happy to see.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, either we will see a miraculous return to form for Portland, or things will collapse exactly the way that we have them forecast.
Yep. I mean, if Austin does lose, it's not the end of things. And if they draw, again, I don't feel like they're going to go for, I don't think that point on the road. And again, here I go revisiting last year, but I don't think that point on the road kind of philosophy from last year is the same kind of mindset that Esteves has. He did talk a little bit about the math a few weeks ago in one of the press conferences, but it was in a more abstracted way. It wasn't like, here's this kind of pragmatic, almost cynical, almost Mourinho-like approach to how to play on the road. And I don't think we're going to quite see that. I think they are going to come out and not necessarily maybe be as adventurous as they are at home with the home crowd behind them with that kind of energy, but I don't think that they're going to tuck into their shells either.
Portland fans are legion, and they really show up. You don't have the problems there that Houston or Dallas have of just a bizarrely half-empty stadium for a team that allegedly the city cares about. Not a problem in Portland. So I feel like this will be one of the first tests of this newly refreshed roster of Austin players playing against that wall of axes. I think there's a lot of youthful vigor, a lot of youthful spite that is going to go into being really hungry for that first away win.
And it is our first 9:30 Central Time kickoff of the year, because it is a West Coast home game, and they have these pesky time zones where they want to watch matches at their normal hour.
Pacific Coast jerks.
It is kind of the best time zone in a way, though.
It's all right. It's all right. I lived in the Eastern time zone for a while when I was in college in Florida, and I got used to that as the Central time zone, but more. And whenever I'm in the Pacific time zone, I feel like I'm on another planet. I feel like I'm on like Venus or something.
It is a little weird. Yeah. If you see your NFL games start at 10 in the morning, that's a bit odd. Of course, those of us who watch Premier League soccer, they have nothing on us. We understand that. We understand what 6:30 a.m. kicks are like.
So, Phil, speaking of late kick times, when it comes to planning Wednesday on Saturday, how important do you think it is to get back into the swing of making your plans and figuring out where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing for an away match day?
I think it's important.
Well, you know what, Phil, tell you what, let me do a little bit of work for people, because our wonderful friends at Los Verdes are hosting their first watch party of the season, and it's going to be at Hop Squad, home base for home match days. And since it's a late kickoff, the marvelous Wizards of LV have put together a lot of fun stuff, some stuff they're trying out for the first time, some stuff that has to be labeled top secret. And if the sound dun, 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 means anything to you, you know what I'm talking about. And technically, I didn't spoil the secret, but especially if you got a family, you got kids, you're going to be encouraged to come out because there's a little surprise if you want to come and hang out for the early part and then maybe head home for halftime to put the kiddos to bed. There is some family friendly specific stuff that is being tried out for the first time that you could expect to maybe make an appearance at future LV watch parties, depending on how it goes. There's maybe going to be some cornhole, long game, that kind of thing. If you want to bring your own cornhole sets out, knock yourself out. It's a good old time. One of the things I love about these watch parties at Hop Squad is that everybody already knows Hop Squad so well, but you have the full ability to just relax. You don't have to get over to the stadium, get your spot, get your chori pan from Little Patagonia. You can just hang out. And if you're hungry, Dough Squad's going to be set up. And if you want to start a fight, maybe get the one with pineapple, because maybe you have a friend who doesn't believe pineapple belongs on pizza. You can have a whole argument. You can play a game that will be not mentioned because it's top secret. And along with their wonderful selection of brews that they always have, they've also added a bunch of new non-alcoholic options as well as non-beer options, frozen bevies, frozen lemonades, along with some functional seltzers that have adaptogens and all sorts of magical things that work better by the light of the moon or something like that. You got those options that are near the beer but not quite the beer. So come on out on Saturday. Start time for the watch party is going to be 7:30. Kickoff, as we know, is 9:30. Hang out, meet some friends. We're going to have a merch booth set up. You might see some familiar faces there, selling some reprints of classic Los Verdes designs that maybe you missed the first time around because maybe you weren't following the team at the time or actively out there. And we've got some older stuff that we're going to have on discount and some scarves as well. So whether it's cold or hot, we're going to have a scarf just for you. So coming out to the LV watch party for the Portland game. Phil, what excites you the most about the notion of an LV watch party at Hop Squad? Is it just the Hop Squad of it all? Is it the people? Is it the vibes? Phil, I got to know.
There's so much of it that does. I like the idea of just gathering at Hop Squad. I like the idea of it being kid friendly. Cornhole is fun. On Saturday, am finding my inner Jeremiah Bentley, and I am going to a gala. Specifically, it is a gala for my daughter's school that my wife is co-chairing. So gotta have to be there on several levels. I was at the one last year, and it was during the Houston match, the Rigoni goal match, the Fodrita Rigoni goals. So good omens. We are 1-0 when a match is played when I am going to a gala. So hopefully the same thing happens, but also 9:30 start time. So definitely going to get in for the post-match press conference. But future watch parties, I definitely want to be at because it's good to be with people when your team is away and you can't be in the stadium.
We'll keep updating everybody on these LV watch parties when they're happening. There will not be a Murga performance at this one, but there might be at future ones, and there's some cool ones coming up too. You definitely want to mark your calendars for the LAFC one that'll be out at ABW Sprinkle Valley, because there's a neat collab that'll benefit a good cause that'll be available exclusively there. And even if Sprinkle Valley is a little ways out for you, it's a really great space, lots of room, lots of kid-friendly stuff too. So watch out for more news from that. Awesome. What do we got coming up? Are we playing more games or just the Portland game? Is that the end of the season?
We are playing more games, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So what I wanted to do to close things out is let's talk a little bit about the future games on the schedule. So if you look at after the first two here, getting into the next 5, it's pretty favorable for Austin, given where it could be. You've got obviously one win in the books with SKC. You've got Portland away when they're transitioning, still trying to get their Evander replacement worked in. Probably not even going to see a full 90. So that is certainly good for all the other reasons that we've talked about as well. And then it goes this way. It's hosting Colorado, which that's been a tricky opponent for Austin to host. But I do have some questions about Colorado. They were, I think, the only team last week to not get off a single shot on goal. They had a 0-0 draw against St. Louis. Some questions there. They still have a lot of the offensive pieces that they've had. They were a playoff team last year, but then they quickly were not a playoff team after they got routed by the Galaxy. And then we're at LAFC, which is That's tricky, obviously, but teams gotten some results there. Last year they got a draw in there, and it is early in the season. If you're going to play LAFC in a match at BMO, fourth game of the season, not a terrible way to do that. Then
Uh-huh.
San Diego, which is a surprising team. And Joe Lowry talked a lot about San Diego on Wednesday because we were just fresh off that win against the Galaxy, but also he really likes what they're doing. I have to see a little bit more of it before I believe it. Still have some questions about their goalkeeping. Still have questions about whether they can, what they did. I'm not really sold on the Galaxy this year. So even though it was surprising that
Yeah.
San Diego beat the Galaxy at home, I'm not sure that beating the Galaxy in LA or Carson is necessarily a tough thing to do.
San Diego game, it also bears mentioning, afternoon game the day after a Liga MX friendly
Oh yeah, yeah.
on the same pitch. So it's going to be
On
Austin
the set,
playing at home against San Diego on a torn to shreds pitch.
maybe. We'll see.
Maybe.
We'll see what the grounds crew can do in 12 hours. And then yeah, because it's also an afternoon
Exactly.
match as well. So not only, yeah, they don't even get a 24-hour turnaround for that one. And then they're at St. Louis and then hosting Portland. Portland for again, the second time in 6 weeks that will be. So I think that, and I'll get your take on this first. What we're going to do is just kind of straight record prediction, win, loss, draw. Where do you think they're going to be after 7 weeks?
Out of those 7 games, all right, there's already one win on the board. I'm not going to go 1-6. That's not going to happen. I think we get 2 draws out of that, out of those 7 games. 2 draws.
Okay.
I think both Portland games are wins. I
Mhm.
think Colorado's going to be a win.
Mhm.
I think San Diego's going to be one of the draws.
Okay.
I think that LAFC game is going to be a win, and St. Louis is the other draw. I don't
So you're at
see I don't
4,
see any
1, and
losses.
2, I think.
I didn't mention a loss. Let's put one loss in there so that I'm not the guy who thinks that Austin never loses. What's the official Phil West sanctioned way of listing win loss draw? Is it win then
Uh,
loss then draw, or win draw loss?
yeah. Yeah, I prefer win draw loss, but win
Okay.
loss draw is what the league has reverted to. So
Okay. Well, forget
I'm
the
gonna
league.
I'm gonna conform with the American.
Oh God. Okay, Phil. I was going to try to buck the trend and conform to the Phil
No, no,
West standard, the best
let's
standard
not
that they
confuse.
had. Okay, fine.
Okay.
That's what 4 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss.
Okay, and who's the loss against again?
Uh, mm, uh, let's say St. Louis. Something
Okay,
stupid
so
happens in St. Louis.
okay. Yeah. So lost to St. Louis and then draws against LAFC and San Diego.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
reasonable. I'm leaning 5-1-1, so very similar. Yeah, in there, I feel like maybe LAFC is still a loss because they don't traditionally do well in that stadium. And it is early in the season, but it is early in the season for both teams. I do think that that is going to be a place where Zuni's going to be able to go a full 90 maybe for the first time. So I'm pretty excited about that. But Bawanga is also going to be able to go a full 90, and that hasn't worked out too well. And then I think maybe it's a draw against San Diego. I mean, I do think San Diego has kind of enough juice right now, especially early in the season. I kind of do think they're going to maybe do, and again, just one game, hard to tell, pretty early, but maybe that kind of St. Louis 2023 energy they're going to bring to the table, win a bunch of games, kind of surprise everybody, buck the trends. Nobody believes in us. Everybody thinks we're going to be a last place expansion team. We'll show them, right? So it could be some of that energy coming in there. But I feel, yeah, like I said, I feel good about, Portland. I feel good about Colorado. I don't know that necessarily anything's going to happen dumb in St. Louis. I mean, it sometimes does.
Some
Like it's
well, here's the thing: is when I say something dumb happens in St. Louis, I don't mean that can necessarily be blamed on the players or the coaches. I'm saying
right.
the officiating. I feel like dumb things happen in St. Louis games sometimes. Just
Okay.
saying.
The flukiness. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes, like there's got to be one game that I assign that fluke to, and I think the St. Louis game is a good place to assign it because since that San Diego
Mhm.
game is going to be so visible as one of the marquee games, I feel like
Mhm.
Varlington, otherwise known as where all the VAR decisions are made for this league, Arlington, Texas. I think Varlington is going to have a real close eye on that
Mhm.
one and keep it relatively by the book. I said my prediction, but I'll back up to the notion of 7 wins, no draws, no losses. I think is
Okay.
actually possible. I think it's actually
That's
possible. I'm not
possible.
saying it's likely, but
Right.
I don't think that for any season of the club's existence, I have felt like they could win the first 7 games. Where I start thinking when I'm just looking at what a prospective win loss draw record is, I feel like the start of this season, the opportunity for the story for Austin is oh yeah, that thing about doubting us, that's back. That's back.
Right.
I see that as being something that will put a lot of gas in the tank for these guys, and they've got
And I mean, again,
fresh young legs on a lot of key positions now.
some things have to happen, obviously. They could lose in Colorado.
Yeah.
St. Louis is where 6-3 happened. Certainly bad things can happen in St. Louis. This isn't like slam dunk. This isn't shiny new optimism because they just won one game, 1-0. But I would just say that the early part of the season sets up really well for Austin in a way that it hasn't in years past. Obviously, last year did not set up well for Austin, especially with the Dreesy injury. You could foretell after that first game, oh, this is going to be some rough going for a little bit here. That bore out. Certainly going to Orlando, like in the first 5 games of the season when players are coming off injury and players are not finding their footing and there's this kind of ultra cautiousness on the road. That was bad. I still have the scars from that, but similarly, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty optimistic about this. Obviously, we'll break down later parts of the season as we go through it. I do think that there are going to be some certainly challenging stretches, but this could be good. Enjoy the ride, because I think if they get another win here on Saturday, then I think we're all going to be feeling pretty good.
Well, Phil, speaking of the start of the season, I get to wrap us up with a completely inconsequential thing. You know what also happened on February 22nd?
No.
4 kittens were born in my house.
Oh, that's right.
4 kittens, 3 points. It's an omen, Phil. Those 4 kittens are going to carry this team for the rest of the season. That's what it is. It's the magic of the kittens. Who needs the chickens of the false 9 when you have the kittens? That's the new vibe. And
so the team is 1-0 when you bring kittens into the world.
I don't think kittens are going to get born every match day, but we'll let it ride for the season. This is the season of newborn kittens.
How many cats can you have? Like, how many cats do you want to adopt?
Too
how
many.
Many pregnant cats do you want?
Too many is what that would feel like. I'm not opening a kitten birthing salon. But some of those cats, they will be up for adoption at some point in the coming weeks. The only other thing for me is just remember the watch party this weekend, especially with a late kick. You may think you're just going to stay home and order Domino's. Go out to Hop Squad and get Dough Squad. The wait will be worth it, and you'll have plenty of company.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We'll be doing the coverage as we usually do. We'll be back. I think we're going to get into a regular schedule here where we're going to jump out on Saturdays. That is the plan, at least. Of course, it is an emergency podcast. Emergencies can happen, or we can declare emergency on our own. Again, just make sure that you are subscribing to one of the services, because from time to time, they will drop, surprisingly, when you least expect them, like kittens.
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.